Hello, everybody. Good evening and good afternoon if you're joining me from Europe. Welcome, welcome to another episode of Intercultural Conversations, where I speak about subjects, and I speak to people who have had experiences in life that I haven't had, or I haven't had the privilege of having, or I haven't been through, which I feel definitely affects our culture, affects our behaviors. And today's conversation is one such conversation which I have no experience in, because it's a conversation that we're going to have about parenting, and I'm not a parent yet. And but I'm going to be joined by two dads who are first-time dads who have a podcast called Pops in a Pod. And they are basically one of the best resources that you can find for how to be fathers, or how to be quote-unquote good fathers, or just basically sharing their journey and the journey of the guests that come on their show, of parenthood and of fatherhood. And I feel parenting in general, we may think has only personal implications, but I think it largely affects culture as well. Just imagine the various generations. For example, the way millennials were a result of the way our parents were raised, which was because of their environmental factors, because of the way their parents considered good, bad behavior, etc. So I think it has huge implications on culture. And I think today's conversation is going to be interesting in a sense that we can see how culture or parenting can affect culture through the ages, and not only that, how can it also affect children, right? So I'm going to add Peter and Nadir, the hosts of Pops in a Pod, to the conversation. Just give me a second, please.
Sorry about that.
Hey, hi Peter. How are you?
That was such a nice introduction, by the way.
Was
It made
it?
me feel far better.
You should feel very good, especially of the work that you're doing. Hi Nadir. It's so good to see you. How are you doing?
Good. It's
How's
awesome
it
to be a
been
part
for
of this.
you? Yes, and I'm very happy. It's almost like a full circle moment for me. I remember coming on, I remember coming on Pops in a Pod where we were talking about my book and, some of
Yeah.
my work as an interculturalist as well. And I just found our conversation, us three, was so interesting, and I had to get you all on the show. So thank you for taking out the time and doing this. I was just wondering, have I missed anything in your introduction? I want to introduce you as host specifically of Fox in a Pod, which I think um, is famous now, if I'm
I
not
mean,
wrong.
Yeah.
I'm going to put a disclaimer, right? Is that good parenting is also subjective, right? A lot of
Oh,
people think good parenting, bad parenting, and especially when it comes to culture. And I'm
hmm
sure we're going to dive a lot into that,
definitely.
because I'm going to just put this out there, right? The reason why Nadir and I started the podcast is, and Nadir should maybe elaborate on it, is that we had done a Google search, and when you search like Indian fathers, the search results that you got, right? About 4 5 years ago, were not the same as you're getting it
Yes.
right now.
Would one be scared to Google Indian fathers 5 years ago?
No, not really. Not scared. I think what the initial hit that you'll get is like Father of the Nation, Mahatma Gandhi. You'll get those responses, right? Like Fatherland, and you'd be like, what? What's going on here?
What is? I
Trying to,
need
like,
more context to this, or I can just start a podcast. I think that was
yeah.
the result for you
I
all.
think
Yeah.
that's exactly how it. Yeah, that's exactly how it sort of went about. Where we had a good laugh on the search results. We still have those screenshots,
Yes.
and
You should
Peter
share
and
those
I, like,
actually. Be nice to see.
yeah, we will. And Peter and I were like, yeah, we have to do this. Somebody has to do this. We can't, keep going around not creating interesting content for ourselves.
Yeah.
And in the introduction, you did say that, Nadir and Peter are here to tell you how to be good dads. Well, the answer is
The
pretty
conditions
simple,
apply,
actually. How
everybody.
to be a
Conditions
dad is
apply.
very easy. It's the easiest thing that you can do. It's how to remain a good dad. That's when the journey starts. So yeah. So for us, I think that is what really encapsulates Pops in a Pod, right? We are not doing it for the content. We are not doing it just because we want to show the world, like, hey, look at us, we're such great dads. No, the point is that one, it's something that naturally comes to us, and two, nobody is talking about the fact that there are so many dads out there who have such lovely stories, the
Hmm.
kind of great experiences that they have, and they're probably very modest and humble to just stay in the background and say, hey, that's cool, man. We don't have to kind of really go out there and talk about ourselves, right? But here's a platform that where we want to invite such parents and such dads and just share the story so that somebody else gets inspired and says that yes, maybe I'm not doing enough for my kids, right? And hopefully that's the chain
And
reaction we're hoping.
actually, rather inspired is the right word, because at the moment I have such a fear of being a parent, considering whatever is happening in this world. There's such a
Yeah,
fear attached to being a parent, but then just to hear other people's fears as well and their journeys, I think I look at Pops in a Pod as an open diary. Like your personal diary that's open for
yeah.
everybody to learn from at least. And like you mentioned yes,
So
Peter?
I would like to say, like, it's a selective diary, right? Because if Nadir and I open our diaries out,
It would be much more entertaining. You never know. We number one
yeah, yeah.
worldwide.
That's not the kind of entertainment we're looking at this point. So
I know.
That is another podcast, another theme, another name. Hope to see that.
Yeah, yeah.
Like you mentioned, right? Because I think for me, as an observer, not as a parent, I think parenting styles have definitely changed over the years. I don't think I'm going to be the kind of parent that my parents were, and this doesn't come from a bad place, it comes from a place of learning. So have y'all seen a shift, a change in parenting styles from one generation to another? Because generation also forms culture, and the way we parent our kids then eventually forms culture also as a huge part of it too. So have y'all seen that major shift happening, or is it just me in my head? It's very possible
So
actually.
I have to add this, right? And I'm sure Nadir has a lot more to say on this. But to set the ball rolling, right? Since we're all kids who grew up in the 80s, 90s, right? A huge aspect of Indian society and culture is movies. So
Yeah.
one of the things Nadir and I, when we were doing ideas for our podcast, we were making a list. We said, "Hey, let's talk about some of these movies." And the thing is, on social media, on YouTube, you see a lot of these reaction videos and stuff like that. We didn't want to do that, but we just wanted to kind of deep dive into some of these movies and just kind of understand from a parenting lens.
Hmm.
Trust me, there are movies in the 90s that released
Hmm.
where both Nadir and I were like, how was this okay? Right? Because when you're watching it as like almost 20 years later, you're just
Hmm.
like, wow. Like, and it still is, right? Sometimes on TV, you'll probably catch some of these movies
In what
in
sense,
there.
though? In the way the parenting is done, or is it that
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
it's
so let's
glorified?
put it simple, right? I mean, why am I saying 90s? Even like early 2000s,
Yes.
uh, it was okay for the father in movies to say, I said it, and this is how it's going to be. No
yeah,
questions asked. And like
Well,
that's a very iconic line in one of the Bollywood movies, right?
मैंने कह
And
दिया
I
तो
was
बच
just like,
गया. Yes, I've said
huh.
it. I've
And
said
I'm
it.
just like, when you look back and see, one of the things you have to realize also, right, is that today's standards don't apply. But my question being that, how is that okay in the 2000s also, right? Because if you take the India part out of it, you don't see that happening anywhere else, right? And unfortunately, that's where the stereotypical Indian dad is, right? Like
Yes,
Indian dads are
yeah,
only portrayed
definitely, I agree there.
in Indian movies in a certain way.
Hmm.
Of course, another aspect is when Nadir and I look at recent movies, we do see it being changed, right? So there is
Hmm.
an evolution in there. And I think when you look at it from like movies are a great way just to capture a certain era, a certain moment in time.
Yes.
And I think that's there. Now that I'm sure you have a lot more to say on this.
No, I'll tell you what has changed dramatically. What has changed?
Hmm.
Um, Excellent point on the whole movie culture. That's who we are as Indians. We grew up on that, on a healthy diet of entertainment and various other fields. I'm sure we all know where we are headed towards when we say that. And we take it as a Bible, and your films, Bollywood, and even television for that matter, and all the soap opera, the soaps and everything that have propagated since 2000. What
Hmm.
has changed, interestingly, is the fact that today, as a viewer, as a user, digital user, I have the control to change the narrative. Right? Back in the 90s, in the 80s, early
Yes.
2000s, you could your thinking would be, मैं जब बड़ा होके राइटर बनूंगा, मैं जब बड़ा होके डायरेक्टर बनूंगा, तब मैं सैलाब ले आऊंगा and I will change everything. Right? That's how you thought, right? But today you can do it now. You go watch a film and you're like, "Hey, what is this rubbish? I'm going to rant on Instagram." You do it, and then suddenly you realize you've gone viral, right?
True.
So today has changed, and there's a reason why Peter and I exist today in this environment. Why an entity called Pops in a Pod exists in this environment? Because we can exist. That's the whole point. The technology has enabled you. The cultural change or the paradigm shift in the culture has enabled you, has emboldened you to do
Mm-hmm.
these things and let people listen to you.
Yes.
And even if we get 1,000 people listening to us, hopefully we can still make a difference to those 1,000. Maybe not even 1,000, maybe 100 out of those 1,000. But it's still a step in the
But
right
that's a
direction.
lot. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Right? That's still a step well, hopefully the right direction. But somebody listens to us or our stories or our guest stories and hopefully gets inspired by that and tries to change that little bit, even if it's 1%, right? But
Mm-hmm.
it's still a change. Something got you to think about the fact that, hey, if these guys can do it, I'm pretty sure I can do it too, and that's great. Yeah,
True.
that would be lovely.
Yes, and that's such a great point, both of them. Especially with respect to Bollywood, I think a lot of our references did come from Bollywood. For me, it still does, many a times. But the thing is, I always saw movies and Bollywood, or even Hollywood for that matter, as a reflection of society. So ये society में हो रहा है, इसीलिए movies में दिखाई जा रही है. Like this is happening in society, and hence it's reflected in the society, in the movies. Now, like you mentioned, Nadir, the control is not only in the hands of those few people who have probably a very uh, unilateral perspective of looking at things. Like there are no multitudes. Now there is the control. It's much more democratized, wherein we can take our experiences and put it out there for people to learn. That's for sure. And I think more than Pops in a Pod being that you taking control back, it's also you also maybe saw a space that it doesn't exist at all, especially in our culture, in our society, and then you were there kind of trying to fill the gap or close the gaps. So
No,
that's
also
right.
the gap is definitely there, but as you said, right, that you have your the film industry who has a way of thinking,
Hmm.
and everyone assumes that's the only way of thinking
That's the only
because it's a
exactly
reflection of the society, which is not entirely true. And you have somebody like a Pops in a Pod, which is maybe a molecule of water in the ocean at this point in time,
right.
right? But we have a different narrative to tell,
Hmm.
which maybe the masses will not, you know, tune themselves towards, but you have a select few who will be like,
Yeah.
hey, I see this, because that's me, and I'm so happy that there is representation for somebody like me via a platform called Pops in a Pod, right? That's the
There's a
change that I think
relatability
that's
then.
correct,
Yes.
right? So you are attaching yourself to a group of commons, right?
Hmm.
And you don't have to necessarily sort of go with the herd. You have a different voice that's coming in. We are that different voice, even though we are small, but we are a different voice.
And that's brilliant. And that's brilliant. And I'm so happy that you're doing what you all are. And actually talking about commonality and talking about relatability, I wanted to know something about differences. For example, if you have friends probably from other cultures, not only from outside India, but from within India as well. Have y'all noticed a difference in the parenting styles, or is it more generational as opposed to more geographical? Have y'all ever noticed any differences with respect to probably a friend who's not from here? Because I did when I was outside, but then I also thought that was generational. I didn't want to blame an entire culture or a country for
Yeah, but I
something.
mean, see, one of the major things I've noticed is, and this is like slowly seeping in into India, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is the whole aspect of independence.
Mm.
So the very fact that, there's that identity also created, that this is your identity away from your parents. By the time you're 18, you're going to college, you're
Yeah.
separate, having your own kind of thing. And giving your kid that independence is not easy,
Yes.
right? Just kind of saying that, this is your space, this is your identity outside of us.
Mm.
I mean, like when I was thinking about it, right, there's always this thing which is said in India, ki, India is becoming more like the West.
Mm.
But it's never, that's always the narrative. It's never that our kids are growing older. I mean, our minds are shifting, our kids are growing older, and this is what they also need. Like
Mm.
when I lived abroad, it was very strange for a lot of people who were like, wait, how come you left home and you're living alone and stuff like that? A lot
Yeah.
of Indians we know still live with their parents. And I was like, because my parents live in the Gulf, they don't even live in India. So then for me, it becomes even harder to explain my
Your
identity in terms
identity,
of, am I
firstly.
Indian? Am I NRI? What am I, kind of thing? But I
Yeah.
think independence is one of those things, right? And when I think about it, like a lot of parents our age now reflect and think back that, hey, why don't, if we had an opportunity to change our lives
Mm.
and make a difference in our kids' lives, we'd kind of make them independent, right? Because
Mm.
there is a value to that. As they grow up older, they can make decisions. You're not dependent on, a collective decision, but you can take decisions on your own. And I
Mm.
think a lot of those things is something that I've seen, at least in the West,
Yeah.
happen a lot. You're seeing it slowly seep in metro cities in India, but it's a very slow thing, right?
Yes, and I believe it's also slow because it's so imbibed in the culture. India as a culture is a very collective culture, is a very family oriented culture. A lot of decisions don't come from the individual or for the individual. It comes, even something as personal as getting married is not an individual decision. It's everybody's decision together,
You took the
sometimes
words out of my mouth. I
including
was
your
just going to
neighbor.
say, like, forget becoming a parent. Like, even before you become a parent, the fact of you getting married is not sometimes your decision, also, right?
Yes, it's a collective
Let's
decision.
let's
I
ask
think.
all the IIM and IIT people who've done both together if they genuinely wanted to do that, right? I'm pretty sure a very high percentage of those people probably didn't want to do either.
Yes, even
I don't want to generalize. I don't want to generalize. I'm just saying that I'm pretty sure a very high percentage of them didn't want to do either.
yes,
Nadir,
a
keeping
lot of
in,
such important decisions are made not, it's made collectively. And
yeah,
the thing to note here is it right or wrong? And usually, as interculturalists, we kind of refrain from then defining it as right or wrong. It's about
yeah.
what is necessary in that moment. So, if you say that it's now necessary for children or the future generation to have a much more independent thinking, then yes, then that parenting style works. But from a cultural perspective, sometimes it gets a bit of a gray area for me then to say, okay, this is right and then this is wrong for sure.
And it's also like when I look at it, right, like Nadir and I keep saying on the podcast, is
Mm.
that our parenting styles are reflective of our parents bringing us up, right? So that's our nearest reflection,
Mm.
or that's our reference in there. So
Mm.
while Nadir and I say that we're modern dads, we're modern relative to our dads, right? Someone else may
Compared to
look
the
at us and
Gen
say,
Z
"Hey,
dads
what
that
is
are
so?"
going to come in the future.
Yeah, like I'm sure there's some 20-something-year-old who was like, "Who are these uncles talking?" Right? It's something like that.
Yes, maybe you're going to get some DMs. Hi, uncle. Yes, yeah,
We have accepted it. It's okay.
yeah.
It's perfectly all right. It's the
I,
aunties who have the problem.
That's the thing. I think I'm at that age. That day there was a kid in my building, and I've seen him grow up. Yes, I think he doesn't remember this. And he comes to me and he's like, "Kya aap auntie ho ya didi? Are you auntie or are you didi?" Please decide for yourself. I don't want to make this life-altering decision for me at this moment. आप मुझे कुछ भी बुला सकते हो. Seriously. But I've also heard some of your podcasts, and we've also spoken. There's this new word. I don't know if it's still trending or if it's still trendy. It's about co-parenting. And I think because co-parenting is where both the parents actually take equal responsibility in having to raise the child. And I was just wondering, because I don't want to offend my father. I'm sure he's going to watch this later. I don't think in our situation it was more of in my situation when I was growing up, it was not more of co-parenting. It was mostly about my father providing, and my mom, she was also working, but most of the nurturing happened by my mother. I was just wondering, you know considering co-parenting is largely being accepted by people, or our generation or your generation specifically, do you think there's some resistance from outside? By outside, I mean, are the previous generation or older generation or just society in general not ready for fathers to be equally involved in the child's life?
Yeah, it's very evident. And see, again, we have this. We live in metros,
Yes.
right? And Bombay is like the metro of metro. So
Mhm.
um, you you will have a very different perspective of what India is. Like, when you go abroad, when you talk to people, you're talking about a very different India, right? Compared to
Tell me
what
about it. Yeah.
somebody from a tier two, tier three town city goes abroad and talks about India, right? Today, being in Bombay, I don't think I would know even say 5% of what's really happening outside of the borders of my city right now.
Mm-hmm.
I choose to ignore, or I'm just genuinely illiterate about it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So what we do in our house, in our city, uh, cannot possibly be a reflection of the entire country, right? Every
Definitely.
state has its own way of dealing with something like parenting. Every community, every caste, every whatever,
Mm-hmm.
you can keep going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, right? I
Very
mean,
new.
in Kerala you have a very strong matrilineal culture. In the the Seven Sisters also have some of the states have a very strong matrilineal culture. But then you have the northern states, extremely patriarchal and very, very proud, where the whole aspect of co-parenting, well, equal parenting is not really, it's alien to them.
Mm.
Well, I'm supposed to work. That's my job, and the wife is supposed to look after the house and the kids, and that's their job. But having said that, since we have obviously seen quite a bit of change in that aspect, I think I think we are moving ahead, right? Slowly, steadily. Uh, we would love to be in the majority in when it comes to equal parenting, but we are not. I think we are abysmally low when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
that. But hopefully, with the advent of new technology, new platforms, more and more such stories will reach out people. And again, as I said, hopefully just inspire people, or at least
Mm-hmm.
inspire different sections to just call out people saying, dude, that's like, not your only job, or stop glorifying that dad. He's doing something that he's supposed to
Yes,
be doing.
that's
Don't
the
say that,
basic that is required in order
right?
to be called a father.
Right? Oh my God, did you see change the diaper? Well, yeah, we did. What's the big? So that's the thing, right? Earlier, I think even I was one of those guys when people would say, "Oh, such an involved," and I used to feel so proud of myself. Then I was like, "Wait, hang on," and my wife would just come and slap me. I was like, "Why are you gloating? For
We're
what? This is
supposed
your
to be
job.
doing
You
this.
signed up for this."
Yes.
So we learned it. We also learned it, right, the hard way. We didn't say that, oh, day one we were dads, the most responsible people in the whole world. No, we've been smacked around by our wives, left, right, center. We still do. So,
I hope they're watching
and
this.
which is okay. No, she's not.
My wife is watching. My
That's
wife
good.
is watching this and saying, "I didn't need to do that." But see, I mean, like I always joke and say, right, like, and I tell my wife, like, she kind of had it easy because for me growing up, and I think this is like the most told story I've had about my parenting journey, is my dad was very involved,
Hmm.
and he wasn't involved because of anything else, uh, but because that was what the situation demanded.
Hmm.
So if he didn't, you know, get me ready for school and feed me breakfast and make my breakfast and all, then I would be hungry, right? Because my mom would go to work early.
Yes.
So my earliest memories of childhood are of my dad getting me ready for school and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And after that, coming back from work when he was tired, saying, "Okay, come on, let's play cricket and do stuff like that." And of course, he traveled a lot. Like my dad, in the early '90s, traveled a lot for work, just because of the nature of his work, working in freight forwarding. But when it came to my turn, that was my earliest reference, right? I went back and saying, "Hey, my dad did it, so it's okay for me to do it,
Hmm.
and there's nothing wrong about it." And this was something I think I always say, that my wife would have not married me if she knew that I was going to be that dad who just stayed back and said, this is what I'm going to do. That's it.
Hmm.
Like, she had high demand. She had that thing that she wanted a partner who would be involved. And her
Yes.
dad was also involved in stuff like that, right? Because I
Hmm.
think that's what happens, at least in families where you've got, uh, come, one second. You've got parents who are both working, right? And that is primarily what we're seeing, at least in India, the shift, where earlier you had just one parent working and
Correct.
going out of the house. Now you're seeing more families where both parents are working out of the house. So you have no choice, both kind of help out, right? Like, it's
Yes.
practically, I cannot imagine any father saying that, what, I'm going out 8-10 hours working. You also are going 8-10 hours working, but I should not do it. Right?
Hmm.
Like, that's not
Hmm.
even something that you could even have a conversation with your partner. So I
True.
think one of the driving factors is, both parents working in there, and that's more and more we're seeing that shift happen, at least in
Yes.
India. I see.
Yes. Like, but beyond the relationship as well, right? Beyond you and your partners as well. Like, for example, like at work, is it more accommodating when a mother has to perform nurturing roles, or is it more accommodating is it equally accommodating when a father says that I have to perform a role that or I'm required or I'm needed by my child or my family? Is it looked at in the same way, or is it looked at as
So
if,
I mean, I'll
okay,
break
you
it
don't
very
need to
simple,
be as
right?
involved?
I'll break it very simple. Like, the number of times, and I'm not speaking for Nadir here, speaking
Hmm.
for myself, the number of times at work I've had to think, hey, can I leave work in the middle of the day to take care of my son? Or come, that's it. Can I pick up my son from work? Can I leave early?
Hmm.
And not for anything else. It's just because, hey, other dads or other people around are not doing it. I'm the only one,
Hmm.
right? So literally,
Hmm.
then you stand out. I mean, take
Yes,
something as simple as paternity leave. Like, I had
exactly.
1 week paternity leave. And at that time, I was like, wow, I have 1 week paternity leave. Now, when I'm looking back, 1 week I have time to just recuperate from the fact that, oh my God,
That you have a
and
baby.
next thing you know, it's like back to work. And
True.
when you think about it, how is it fair in that scenario, right? And especially, how is it
True.
fair for the mother where the dad gets like 1 week and then goes off to work? And then it's the mother who's kind of doing all of that, right? So
Yeah.
paternity leave is a huge thing. And I think a lot of that slowly is changing.
Yes.
I don't know how much of it is PR or how much of it is actually, being
I think that's
implemented, right?
definitely changing with the newer companies, with startups as well. I just hope that it scales to bigger organizations that hire in mass, literally, so that, it kind of percolates generally into society as well. So, like, for
That's
example,
going to
I
take a
didn't know
while. That
that's going
that
to take a
is
while.
going to take a while. It's not going to happen, overnight. This is
Mm.
something that's going to take a while, even to sort of bring in about basic adjustments. For So when I have got out of work a lot because I had to do something for my daughter. Right? My
Mm.
wife also works, and when office hours, I mean, when office was on, she had to travel quite a distance.
Hmm.
I was lucky enough in the last 6 7 years of my life. I've got work, very close to home. So
Okay.
obviously there's an advantage to that.
Hmm.
So whether it's something related to school, or she's not well, or she needs to be picked up, dropped, whatever it is, and I've had very kind people who've accepted the fact that okay, listen, he's a dad, he has to do certain things.
Hmm.
In fact, I remember my previous organization. It was the initial weeks when I had joined, and there was an annual party, and it starts at 7:30. So I decided to leave by about 6:30 because it's a routine for me to come, to come back home and sort out everything for my daughter, whether it's bathing her, massaging her, putting her to sleep. That was my responsibility. So even if there was a party, it was very clear that I will go back home, do all of this, and then I'll show up, for the party. So my then senior leader was like, "Where are you going? Why are you not coming?" I said, "No, I need to go and put my daughter to sleep." And like, she didn't flinch. Like, "Oh, should your wife be doing that?" She did, and I think that's what makes a huge difference. I wasn't expecting her to react in any way, but I was glad that she's like, "Oh, okay, yeah, 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 go ahead, do that, do that."
That
I
this
think
is
that's
a possibility. There is somebody else
right.
who
Yeah,
could
and
be
I
helpful.
think in so I've never been in that situation where people have told me, but shouldn't your wife be doing that? I
Hmm.
have not received that yet.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't know, maybe behind my back they say something else. But luckily to my face they don't react in that way. And that's always pleasing. Even in my current organization, because of this whole school starting now and
Hmm.
no buses allowed, so constantly running around, dropping, picking, all of that, right? So they've been
Hmm.
extremely accommodating in aspects where if I have to go and pick her up at 12:30, they'll allow me that liberty, or they'll say just stay at home, don't need to come physically to work, just work from home. It's perfectly fine. You sort out
Hmm.
whatever that needs to be done, and I like that because I think this new generation really understands that. And
Yes.
for a lot of people, I think being with your family, your kid, is priority, and people get it, right?
Hmm.
And this entire this is evolution that we are seeing of mental health um, coming in, which is now very much in the foreground. People get it. They're like, okay, man, whatever helps you,
Hmm.
sort of works for you. That's great. And
Hmm.
I'm really really thankful that there are people like that who are very understanding, even though they, especially the ones who are not parents, right?
Yeah.
That they get it. That
Yes.
okay, he has a responsibility for another kid who's not, free enough or old enough to do things herself. And they
Hmm.
get it. And I appreciate that. So I think that's also an interesting change that I have seen in the last few years.
Yes, and I think it could also be because of information being very easily accessible these days. Yeah, so there is information out there, your podcast being one of the examples, and generally a lot of other mothers also who have started their own podcasts and who started their own blogs, etc. I was just wondering though, are there enough resources available for fathers? Because I know for a fact there are enough resources available for a mother, in a sense propagating how to be a good mother and what are the things that would be required in order to raise a child, or for the care of the child as well. I was just wondering, are there enough resources available for fathers also? Because even though it's equal parenting, a mother and a father have very distinct roles as well. If I'm not wrong, I'm saying this not out of experience. I'm just saying it out of pure assumption. But I'm just wondering, are there?
I mean, I'm going to stick my neck out on the line here and say there isn't. And there
Hmm.
probably won't be also, right?
Hmm.
Because just look at simple examples. Just look at the number of dads on the playground with their kids. You can count, right?
Hmm.
And there has to be that kind of thing because, like, Nadir and I recently were added to a father's group, and we were totally unaware. Like, we've been doing this podcast for like 3 years, and we never knew there was like a WhatsApp group of fathers.
Okay.
Somebody else put up on Twitter that, hey, I'm a recent dad. I'm looking to join similar groups or like-minded dads, because my wife is suddenly, part, and suddenly you can see the distinct, just like you're saying, like with mothers, the moment, you're pregnant or either you've delivered, automatically one mother or a friend will add you.
Yes.
But dads, that doesn't happen.
That
That's
doesn't.
just not
That
happening, right? So
initiation
then,
is only not there. That idea that there
yeah,
can be a community where we can talk about our problems similarly.
yeah,
I think.
and then this goes back to again the culture, right? Because honestly, in my head, and I hate saying this out loud, but it's like, what will dads get together and talk about, right?
Mm.
Because that's the assumption. It's like, what do you kind of talk about as dads?
Yeah.
And maybe say before I became a parent, before I met Nadir, I would have also had a very similar reaction to what's a dad podcast really about, right?
Yes.
But the moment I met Nadir, the moment I realized that, hey, there is somebody who has a very similar thinking as me, similar approach to parenting, the reason we did the podcast. And through the podcast, I'm glad over the last 3 years, we've met so many people who've kind of identified with us, right? And I'm
Yeah.
not saying like 100%, but there are certain aspects of us that they identify with, certain thoughts that we have, they identify with. And I just feel that, more and more needs to be done. I mean,
Yeah, it needs to
I
be
don't
done.
know. I don't know any dad Facebook groups, by the way.
I think that
Zero.
is also a reflection of how we think, right? It's bearing a child, etc., or raising a child or nurturing is also very gender specific. If you go to see of how we've been raised, how not only how we've been raised, but of what we see, of what we experience. It just seems like it's a very it's most of the responsibility does lie with one gender, that is usually the mother or the female guardian. So I can understand why there are not enough there's not enough information available, or why you would feel, you know why is there a need even to have a WhatsApp group, for example. That never even struck somebody's mind that that is a possibility, that we can have a community where we can learn how to be good fathers together. That's for sure. But talking about your journey of fatherhood also, just I wanted your personal perspectives on what do you think is, one, the easiest part of being a father, and two, the most difficult part of being a father, because I know a lot of my followers are first time dads, and they're new dads, a lot of my followers, and I think this is something that would really help them.
So, I mean, easy is, I'm not sure if that word even strikes anything when it comes to parenting. There's no such thing as
That's
easy.
a wrong question, brother.
No, I think it's a great question because it makes you think, and like we've been thinking that
Yes.
what is the easy, but I think all the fun stuff
Mm,
is the easy stuff in a way, right?
mm,
Playing, and because it comes very naturally, right? So I think when parenting comes naturally, and it's not something that is forced upon you, like you don't have to do it very grudgingly, right?
mm.
I think then that is easy. I suppose, again, I'm not sure I'm giving you the right answer, but it's a struggle to think that what is really easy, because what happens is when your kid starts growing, right,
Mm.
you see every day new facets of your child which you were not prepared for, right? And I think the biggest thing is opinions, right? When they start forming
They can have.
opinions,
100%.
You're a part of me. How can you
nothing
have
prepares you
opinions
for that.
different than mine?
Nothing prepares you for that, because they will just come up with such amazing stuff, right? Like kids say the
Yes.
most amazing, beautiful things. They just tell you, right? Very, very recently, and I'll give you an example. I put her as an Instagram post also. She said, we're just having a conversation, and we're just saying that, listen, when you turn 18, you have to leave this house. You have to leave. That's it. You're like, our responsibility towards you is done. You leave the house when you're 18.
That's
And
brave
she,
of
and
you.
she was livid. She was absolutely livid. And she's like, and she's 5.5 years old. I'm going to tattoo bad mom and dad on my head. And I'm just going to walk. And we were like, where is she even getting these ideas of like tattoo bad mom on my head? Right? There's just too much emotion in that one sentence. And we were like, wow, like how do you deal with that, right? And imagine she's 5.5. What's gonna happen when she turns 13? Right?
Oh
That's
God.
dreadful. Right? That's so
Nadir,
Break
dreadful
up
for
with
us
it,
to even think.
Nadir. What are you going to do? I
So
did
yeah,
that
I
to
mean,
my father. I came home with a tattoo. But it did say bad father. It didn't say that. So
so
Nadir,
yeah,
all the best
that's
is
my version. That's my version of Amitabh Bachchan angry on my "Mera Baap Chor Hai," right?
oh
That's
my
what my dad.
God.
That's what my daughter's gonna do. Bad moment, dad. Just gonna
But
advertise it and walk around everywhere. God.
But it's amazing. I can't wait
Yeah.
for her to
but
grow up, really. Please document all of this journey with Zia. Zia is her name.
no, but on a serious note, right? Like coming back to what you said with information, is that every day, and I think like the news and cycles, I mean, just like research, right? Like prime example, coffee. Every few weeks you read either coffee is good for you or bad for you or this or that. And then similar things with parenting happen, right? Like every time you questioning yourself that, okay, am I doing the right thing
Right
as a
thing or
dad?
the wrong thing? True.
And you're learning. And I think one of the thing, and I think Nadir shares the sentiment, so I can say it, is that I don't think we'll ever be the best or the good or the ideal dads, right? Because it's a journey.
Hmm.
Like I would love to like imagine what Nadir and I having this conversation at 60 something being like, oh my God, we thought we were going to be good dads, right? I think I foresee it's going to be something like that, right? Like
Yeah, but
when
now
our
our
kids are
children have tattoos.
teenagers. Yeah. Never let your kids have tattoos. But that's it. That's how I see it going to be, right? Because again, coming to the subjective part, right? What you were saying from culture, it's always the reference that you have, and every day there's like a new definition. I mean, like 5 years ago, no one was using co-parenting. It was called modern parenting, or
Whoa.
it was called new age parenting. So now every few years you come up with these new terms, new things,
Hmm.
and then you're just trying to kind of figure out, hey, am I fitting it? Am I aligning with it?
Yes.
And you don't know, right? Because so like you can only live in the present and make the most of it,
Hmm.
as opposed to just like future gazing and always focusing on that, right? And I think as a
True.
parent, for me, that has been the most wonderful thing, is that focus on this present, spend each day with my son. Then that makes life of being a parent slightly less difficult, I would say.
I hope that is that's how it works out. We're talking about future gazing. I usually end my conversations with this question. I've gotten feedback that it's a very heavy way to end a conversation, but I'm really close to this word, and I'm really close to what this question holds also. Right. So if there is one thing that either of you would want to change, and that change doesn't have to be outside, like, okay, I'm going to end world hunger or poverty will not exist anymore because of me. It's not, I hope that happens. But if there's something that you want to change outside of yourself, anything big or small, or within yourself, what would it be?
I think I'm very forgetful, so I want to change that for sure.
Did you forget what you had to answer?
No, it's genuine. Like it's a very HR kind of a question. So it's like, oh, what do you see, or what are your strengths and your weaknesses, sort of thing. And I always, I think somewhere at some point in time, I always fought up because I'm pretty forgetful. So Peter's always making sure he's sending me calendar invites every time. It's like, "Nadir, we have
Google
a
Calendar
call
for the
today.
win.
We have a meeting today." Like last time we were supposed to get on a call at 10, so we must have discussed it the previous day, night, and then I call him. I call him at 10.
Hmm.
And then I'm like, why are we on this call? What's the objective of this call? And he's like, did you not hear anything that I said yesterday? And I was like, Arey, I'm 2 days, man. I'm sorry. So yeah, so that happens, and I think when you're a parent, somewhere I think there's a medical term that and moms keep getting attributed to it, which is they get completely spaced out.
Mm-hmm.
Initial period when they become moms, then memory is something that gets affected very badly. I think I'm one of those parents.
Yeah.
And my wife keeps reminding me that stop forgetting. Right. From an outside standpoint, as an extraneous factor, I just don't. I just hope people stop judging immediately, right? And uh, whether it's an Indian thing or whether it's a global thing, I don't know. But
Mm.
people are very quick to judge. I used to be one of them, right? Quick to judge, right? Uh,
Yes.
People always thought I was a snob, and I wasn't. And I was like, I don't know why people think I'm a snob. But I used to be one of those very quick to judge. And what happens is that with age and experience, you realize, all that you have been doing wrong because now you see it in the new generation, like idiots. You
And they're
shouldn't be
judging you
doing.
back. Like, all the
And then I'm like,
judgmental
oh my
karma is
god, I was
coming
one
back
of
to you.
them. I used to be one of them. So, I honestly, from an extraneous factor, don't be too quick to judge. Give people time.
Mm.
They also have their own problems. They also have their own issues,
Yeah.
and try and understand them. And I think parenting is exactly like that. We're just very quick to jump to that saying, "Oh my God, did you just see what she did to her kid?" Right? Shouldn't do that.
Mm.
And because trust me, that mom, that dad, they're trying their best. And when we see something even slightly off, we are like, ah, I don't know why these people even have kids when they can't take care of. It's very easy. It's very easy to say that.
I
So,
feel so guilty when you say that.
yeah, and everyone does it.
I've made
I
those
said,
statements on flights. Very
haha,
obvious.
everyone has done it, including me. I have also done it. So it's okay.
So life comes a full circle, right? At one point, you're the one wearing the noise canceling headphones, saying that, oh my God, these kids. And then
Mm.
you become that parent. That's a full circle. Like, then you
Yes.
become the parent whose kid is screaming, and you're just like, okay. And you see others putting their noise canceling.
So
But
good.
for me, I think one of the major things I need to change, and like now it's become very obvious with my son, is just that, like, to be more patient, right?
Mm.
And that's the thing about parenting, right? Like Nadir says, we live in a generation right now, everything has to be instant, fast, there.
Yes.
And sometimes that impairs your decision making, right? The more I've realized, and I keep saying this, like the last time I said, okay, I want to be patient, I was on a customer service call for 3 hours. So I hope this doesn't happen to me again. But it really, really humbles you, right? You realize that, hey, if I can be patient or
Mm.
uh, take my time with this, why can't I do this with other aspects of my life, including parenting, right? Because a 5-year-old doesn't understand that, something that they did is seriously wrong or just like a normal, casual
Mm.
thing, right?
Mm.
It's only
Mm.
you as a parent to understand that. And that's where you have to kind of exercise your judgment and just be a little more patient.
Yeah.
Externally, wow. That's so much. I want to say world hunger, but yeah, since you said it.
I
But
hope that happens.
yeah, I think like externally, and maybe probably I'm going to be selfish here and saying with Pops in a Pod, right? Like one of the things I've realized is we want the community, and I keep now recently I've been saying it is that Pops in a Pod was never envisioned as Nadir and Peter. Now, Pops in a Pod was everyone who thinks very similar to us and kind of
Hmm.
develop and build that community of like-minded dads. Is I want other dads to have that feeling of the first time I met Nadir, and I was like, hey, Nadir is the guy who leaves work at 6 o'clock to do all of this. That's
Hmm.
who I should be like, or that's what is
Wow.
cool
That was the
and there. And I
inspiration.
think,
That's the inspiration for you.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think every dad kind of needs that one guy, one friend who kind of does that and says, if he can do it, I can do it. So I think that relatability thing. So that's definitely something I want to change. Like build this entire community of dads where next time you won't be talking to two, maybe you'll be talking to like multiple people who have
10
very
people
similar
on this
experiences.
live, each saying their
Yeah,
own stories,
yeah,
own funny stories of their experiences. Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much, Nader and Peter, for being here. Thank you for doing the work that you are doing, which I feel is hopefully the new Bible, especially from an Indian perspective for fathers to kind of look back at and kind of learn from these stories. and learn from all of the experiences that you have had, and learn from the changing dynamics of parenting that is happening right now, and that they are, if they are co-parenting or equal parenting, and if they feel out of place, then they have other fathers here too who feel out of place, and there's a WhatsApp group for it apparently. So guys, please follow Pops in a Pod. And is there anything else that you want to share where they can find you, each one of y'all, before we go?
I go as Nadir Kanthala on Instagram and all other social networks. And yeah, Pops in a Pod is exactly how it sounds. Pops in a Pod. Just search for it on Google, social media, wherever, and yeah, you can follow us, subscribe to us on any podcast platform that you all prefer. We're there on all major podcast platforms.
The platforms launch and we're on there. It's
yeah.
but that's the advantage of working. Yeah, like, so the thing is, Nadir and I used to work at a digital agency together, right? And I remember before we even launched the podcast, we had created Excel sheets and docs, and we were collaborating, and then we came up with the name. And I think because it keeps coming up, I had blocked the email address on Gmail. I had blocked all the social media handles because I was not taking a chance, right? You know that sometimes you'll always get. So all of it, luckily, we managed to get and still hold. Like, that's why we ended up getting .com and .in, because I was like, I want both. I don't want anyone using Pops in a Pod. So yeah, that's cool. Just search for Pops in a Pod everywhere. And Google has been kind to us after 3 years. When you search Pops in a Pod and our names, you'll just find.
Yeah.
That's
great.
But, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing your time. And I hope to see you all soon.
Definitely.
Soon.
Right?
Thank
Bye.
you.
See ya.
See you.
Bye.